He almost didn't come. Sitting in his car outside the restaurant, he checked the time again, debating whether to walk in or just drive away. It had been a long day, the kind that drained more than just energy. Work, responsibilities, and the quiet weight of raising a child on his own had become his normal. Dating wasn't something he had time for, and honestly, it wasn't something he fully trusted anymore, but he stepped out anyway. Inside, the restaurant was warm and calm, filled with soft light and quiet conversations. It felt like a different world from the one he had just left. He spotted her almost immediately. She was already seated, composed, looking around as if she was observing everything rather than waiting impatiently. When their eyes met, she gave a small, genuine smile, not forced, not rehearsed, real. He walked over, introducing himself with a polite tone, taking the seat across from her. The first few minutes were what he expected: simple questions, careful answers, the kind of conversation people use to understand each other without revealing too much. She listened more than she spoke, which he noticed right away. Most people tried to impress. She didn't. As the conversation continued, he found himself relaxing slightly. There was something about her presence that didn't demand anything from him. She wasn't trying to figure out what he could offer or what he had achieved. Instead, she seemed more interested in how he spoke, how he thought, how he responded. Still, part of him stayed guarded. That part had been built over time, shaped by experiences that taught him not to open up too quickly. As a single father, he had learned to be careful about who he let into his life. It wasn't just about him anymore. Every decision carried weight beyond himself. The waiter arrived, breaking the rhythm briefly as they placed their orders. When the conversation resumed, it shifted slightly, moving away from surface-level topics. She asked about his day, his routine. He almost didn't come. Sitting in his car outside the restaurant, he checked the time again, debating whether to walk in or just drive away. It had been a long day, the kind that drained more than just energy. Work, responsibilities, and the quiet weight of raising a child on his own had become his norm. Dating wasn't something he had time for, and honestly, it wasn't something he fully trusted anymore, but he stepped out anyway. Inside, the restaurant was warm and calm, filled with soft light and quiet conversations. It felt like a different world from the one he had just left. He spotted her almost immediately. She was already seated, composed, looking around as if she was observing everything rather than waiting impatiently. When their eyes met, she gave a small, genuine smile, not forced, not rehearsed, real. He walked over, introducing himself with a polite tone, taking the seat across from her. The first few minutes were what he expected: simple questions, careful answers, the kind of conversation people use to understand each other without revealing too much. She listened more than she spoke, which he noticed right away. Most people tried to impress. She didn't. As the conversation continued, he found himself relaxing slightly. There was something about her presence that didn't demand anything from him. She wasn't trying to figure out what he could offer or what he had achieved. Instead, she seemed more interested in how he spoke, how he thought, how he responded. Still, part of him stayed guarded. That part had been built over time, shaped by experiences that taught him not to open up too quick. As a single father, he had learned to be careful about who he let into his life. It wasn't just about him anymore. Every decision carried weight beyond himself. The waiter arrived, breaking the rhythm briefly as they placed their orders. When the conversation resumed, it shifted slightly, moving away from surface-level topics. She asked about his day, his routine, paused, choosing her words with care. I mean, I could meet you without everything around you, without the pressure, the expectations, the weight. She gestured lightly, not at him, but at the idea of his life. He frowned slightly, trying to understand. You think my life is a problem? No, she replied quickly, shaking her head. I think it's impressive. I just don't think it shows all of you. That made him lean back again, this time not out of confusion, but thought. Most people he met focused on what he had built. Asked about success, about growth, about results. Few asked about what it cost him to get there. And what do you think you're missing? He asked. She held his gaze. The version of you that didn't have to prove anything. The answer caught him off guard. He hadn't thought about that version of himself in a long time. Before the long hours, before the responsibilities multiplied, before every decision had consequences that reached beyond him. Back then, life had been simpler, but also uncertain. I don't think that version exists anymore, he said honestly. She nodded slowly, as if she expected that. Maybe not. But I think it still shows in small ways. The way you listen, the way you pause before answering. You're careful, not because you have to be, but because you've learned to be. He didn't respond right away. Her words weren't criticizing him, they were observing him. And somehow, that felt more personal than anything else. The waiter returned briefly, placing their food on the table. Neither of them spoke until he left again. The interruption gave him a moment to think, to process what she had said without the pressure of responding immediately. You're the first person to say something like that, he admitted. She gave a small smile. Most people are focused on what's visible, and you're not. I try not to be. The conversation shifted after that, but not back to where it started. There was something deeper now, something more intentional. He found himself answering differently, not with rehearsed responses, but with honesty that surprised even him. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't being evaluated for what he had done, he was being understood for who he was, and that made him stay. The conversation didn't return to anything simple after that. It moved forward, deeper, more intentional. He found himself speaking in a way he hadn't in a long time, not measured for impact, not shaped for impression, but honest in a way that felt unfamiliar. She listened carefully, not interrupting, not rushing to respond. When he spoke about his routine, she didn't focus on the structure of his work, but on the way he described it. When he mentioned his responsibilities, she didn't react with admiration or sympathy. She just understood. At one point, she asked about his child. The question was simple, but it carried weight. He paused for a moment before answering, not because he didn't want to share, but because it mattered more than anything else. Everything I do, it's for them, he said quietly. Every decision, every plan, every step forward. She nodded, her expression soft but thoughtful. That must be a lot to carry. It is, he admitted. But it's also the only thing that makes sense to me. For a second, the conversation slowed, not because it lost direction, but because it reached something real. Something that didn't need to be filled with words. You don't let people see that side of you, do you? She asked gently. He looked at her, surprised by the question. Not really. Why? He thought about it, searching for an answer that wasn't automatic. Because it changes how people see you, he said finally. They either feel sorry for you, or they start expecting something from you, and you don't want either. No, she leaned back slightly, consider his words. I think that's why I said what I said earlier. He watched her, waiting. It's not that I want you to lose what you've built, she continued. I just think, people get distracted by it. They stop seeing the person behind it. Her words settled into something deeper now. He realized she wasn't talking about money or status at all. She was talking about identity, about how easily it could be shaped by what people see on the outside. I've spent years building something stable, he said slowly. Not just for me, for my child. That's not something I can separate from who I am. I know, she replied softly. I respect that. I just don't think it should define all of you. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he sat there, absorbing the thought in a way he hadn't expected. For years, his life had been about structure, about control, about making sure nothing fell apart. In doing that, he had built something strong, but maybe, he had also hidden parts of himself without realizing it. The realization wasn't uncomfortable. It was quiet, and for the first time that night, he smiled slightly, not out of habit, but because the conversation had become something he didn't expect, something real, and he wasn't ready for it to end. The dinner continued, but it no longer felt like a first meeting between two strangers. The careful distance that usually exists in moments like this had faded, replaced by something more natural, more grounded. He noticed it in the way they spoke now. No hesitation, no need to impress, just a steady exchange of thoughts that felt genuine. For a while, neither of them spoke about anything heavy. They allowed the conversation to breathe, shifting into lighter moments, small observations, quiet humor. It gave him space to reflect on everything she had said without feeling pressured to respond immediately. He watched her as she spoke, noticing the way she chose her words. She wasn't trying to lead the conversation or control it. She simply allowed it to unfold. That alone set her apart from anyone he had met in a long time. You're different, he said suddenly, almost without thinking. She looked up at him, slightly surprised. Different how? He considered the question for a moment. You don't react to things the way most people do. You don't seem impressed or intimidated or even curious about the usual things. She smiled faintly. Is that a bad thing? No, he said, shaking his head. It's just unexpected. She lowered her gaze briefly, then looked back at him. I've learned that when you focus too much on what someone has, you miss who they are. The simplicity of her answer stayed with him. He realized how often his life had been defined by what was visible. Not just to others, but even to himself. His success, his responsibilities, his routine, they had all become part of how he understood his own identity. But sitting here now, none of that seemed to matter in the same way. What about you? He asked. What do people usually see when they meet you? She paused, thinking. Most people think they understand me quickly, she said, but they usually don't. And I do, he asked, a slight hint of curiosity in his tone. She met his eyes, holding the moment just long enough to make it meaningful. You're trying to. The answer felt more honest than anything else. The evening slowly began to wind down, the restaurant growing quieter as people left one by. Neither of them rushed to end the conversation, but both understood that the night was coming to a close. When the bill arrived, he reached for it without hesitation. Didn't argue, but she didn't make it a moment either. It was simple, natural, without expectation or assumption. As they stood to leave, there was a brief pause between them. Not awkward, just uncertain in a quiet way. I'm glad I came, he said. She smiled, this time a little more openly. They walked toward the exit together, the night air greeting them as they stepped outside. For a moment, they stood there, neither quite ready to leave. He realized something then. This wasn't just a good conversation. It was the beginning of something he hadn't planned for, and for once, he wasn't trying to control where it would go next. They stood outside for a moment longer than necessary, neither of them in a hurry to walk away. The night air was cool, carrying a quiet calm that matched the feeling between them. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't overwhelming, but it was real. He looked at her, not with the guarded distance he had at the beginning of the evening, but with a quiet understanding. Something had shifted. Not just in how he saw her, but in how he saw himself. I didn't expect tonight to go like this, he admitted. She smiled softly. Most things that matter don't start the way we expect. He let out a small breath, almost a laugh, but quieter. That's true. There was a pause, but this time it felt comfortable. Not empty, not uncertain, just a moment shared without needing to fill it. I've spent a long time making sure everything in my life makes sense, he said slowly. Every decision, every step, it all had a purpose. Tonight didn't, she asked gently. He shook his head. Did. Just, not the kind I'm used to. She understood what he meant without needing him to explain further. For what it's worth, she said, I didn't mean what I said earlier to push you away. I know, he replied. It just caught me off guard. I think sometimes we need that, she added. Moments that don't fit into what we've already planned. Looked at her again, this time with a small, genuine smile. You definitely did that. Both laughed lightly, the tension from earlier now completely gone. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he wasn't carrying everything alone. Not because his responsibilities had changed, but because someone had seen beyond them. Recognized the person behind the structure he had built. That version of me you were talking about, he said, pausing briefly. I don't know if it's gone. Maybe it's just been quiet for a while. She nodded. Then maybe it just needed the right moment to show up again. The words stayed with him. He realized that for years, he had been focused on building a life that was stable, predictable, secure, and he had done that successfully. But somewhere along the way, he had stopped letting himself be seen beyond that role. Tonight changed that, not completely, not all at once, but enough to remind him that there was more to him than what he had built. Can I see you again? He asked, this time without hesitation. She didn't answer immediately, but her smile said enough before her words followed. Yes. Simple. Clear, and for him, that was more than enough. As they went their separate ways, he didn't feel the usual return to routine. Instead, he carried something new with him. Not pressure. Not expectation, possibility, because sometimes, the most unexpected words lead to the most meaningful beginnings.